Hello, I'm Elizabeth Walker, and I'm chairing the subgroup that's looking at the review of the Palaeolithic and Mesolithic periods for the Research Framework Review for the Archaeology of Wales. In this short presentation, I'm just going to give you an idea of some of the key sites that we have in Wales that date to the Palaeolithic and Mesolithic periods. And I'll talk about some of the research that has taken place at these sites over the past years. I'll then move on to highlight some of the research objectives that we set when we last undertook this review about 5 years ago, and highlight some of the changes that have taken place and some of the new research that has come arising from that, and then to give you the opportunity to be able to provide input into the development of the new research agenda as we go forward too. So to start with, I will show you some of the key sites. And this is the cave of Pont Newydd Cave, which is up in Denbighshire. It was the subject of the late Professor Stephen Oldhouse Green's excavations between the 1970s and 1990s. And in the course of his research there, he recovered the remains of an early Neanderthal. And these are remarkable finds. These are some of the handful of early hominin fossils that we have from sites across the whole of the UK. And dating back to about 250,000 years ago, these fossils contain all sorts of evidence that can tell us about their life, their diet, the past environment, and so much about the landscape of Wales and the changes that have taken place in the periods represented by the deposits within the cave. And that feeds into the bigger picture of our understanding of where we are and how we've come to where we are today. Now, the collection of finds that have been recovered from the excavations at Pont Newydd were published as part of the major research book that was brought out in 2012. But this research continues. The techniques that were applied at the time the research was undertaken have really moved forward, and as a result there are opportunities to revisit some of the material that was recovered from this cave and to do and apply new techniques and new research too. If we look at this cave, Paveland Cave, I think this is perhaps one of the best examples where revisiting the research that's undertaken over years has really brought to light new information and new discoveries. The skeleton of the Red Lady of Paveland, recovered in the 1820s by Professor William Buckland, has been revisited, restudied on multiple occasions that on each occasion have brought it to be slightly older in age than previously thought, until we're now reasonably comfortable that this is an early modern human dating to a period around about 36,000 years ago. Now, remains such as these skeletons and other finds have ended up emptying the cave of deposits, all of this previous research, but it's those finds that contain information that can be revisited and reanalyzed and restudied. So, for instance, the Red Lady of Paveland, thought to be such when first recovered, we now know to be the remains of a young adult male, aged around 23 at death. Other research is ongoing. Professor Stephen Oldhouse Green also conducted excavations at some of the caves outside Tenby. This is Hoyle's Mouth Cave near Tenby in Pembrokeshire, and I'm now pulling together the research that was undertaken here and bringing together that final report for this work. And coming back to this cave after a period of a gap of a number of years, we're able to apply brand new scientific techniques to some of the finds and some of the evidence that was recovered. So things are constantly moving forward, and nothing's ever static in archaeology, even when we're dealing with such deep time. Now, Hallsmouth Cave is significant in that it's a cave that has occupation which spans both the period before the last glacial or ice advance and afterwards too. So it's a good example where we have the resettlement of Wales and people coming back into Wales after that really cold period has come to its end. Now, not all discoveries are made by archaeologists, and indeed there are schemes such as the Portable Antiquities Scheme, which are encouraging members of the public to report their finds to museums and to the scheme. And it's the discovery of these two flints here that by a member of the public out walking his dog that led to the discovery of a new late glacial site at Cop Hill, just outside Chepstow in Monmouthshire. Now, these finds led on to Mark Lodwick of the Portable Antiquities Scheme and myself going out to visit the site and then organising a community field walk, which involved members of the local Chepstow and Shire Newton communities, as well as bringing in some students from universities too. So this is an example where a find made by a non-archaeologist can lead to some important information, because this is a rare example of an open-air campsite for this period, round about, we think, about 12,600 or so years ago. Other discoveries are revealed by community groups and by experts in their field. And Dr. George Nash is a rock art expert, and he has been systematically looking at the walls of some of the Welsh caves, looking for traces of cave art. And indeed, back in 2012, he found some art engraved on the wall of Cathole Cave. And this discovery led on to new research being undertaken not only on the engravings, but also on some of the surviving wall deposits within the cave as part of a scheme to grill the cave and to protect the important resource into the future too. Museums hold considerable bodies of evidence from earlier and historic work at various sites. These penknife points found at Priory Farm Cave near Pembroke in Pembrokeshire were recovered in the early 1900s, and these show a sequence of evolution in tool form and tool technology. But also then we can revisit some of these sites and get perhaps a better context and an archaeological context today for some of these, whilst also having those remains to be able to look at and study in our National Museum and indeed all our museum collections around the country too. Science is constantly moving forward. And here we see radiocarbon dating in particular is now applied commonplace, but is perhaps a technique that we should be applying more to many of the organic finds that we have recovering and are recovering from various sites, because what we often have is just a snapshot, a single radiocarbon date, rather than perhaps a whole series of dates, which can help us to understand the nuances of a site and that the intricacies of human presence and absence when they come and when they go, and their use of particular caves and other open air sites at specific times throughout the past too. Turning to the Mesolithic, we have a wealth of Mesolithic evidence, in particular coming now from around the Welsh coastlines. We have evidence from of settlements that are now submerged because the sea level has made such major changes over the course of the last interglacial period. We also can make remarkable discoveries from the study of some of the stone tools. Here we have a microlith, which at first glance might not seem unusual in any way, but it has the remains and traces of a microscopic blobs of glue that would have been the hafting resins that would have held it in place into its wooden or antler shaft. And these glues can be analysed. So it becomes important to consider the invisible to the naked eye, some of those things that we need to look at in new ways and think about as they are recovered. Also very small in size. This, again, as with the microlith in the previous slide, is from my own excavations on Bury Homes, and where we were able to apply 100% wet sieving strategy to the site, and we're able to recover things like these lesser celandine tubers that give us an insight into people's diet in the past as well. So we also want to understand the humans, their place in the landscape, what they were doing, when they were there. There are so many questions that we have to ask of all of our various sites. And also looking for traces of those people themselves too. Human footprints of Mesolithic age have now been recovered from a whole range of places around the Severn estuary levels, in particular around Goldcliff, Uskmouth, Redwick. Here, Uskmouth, it's a line of human prints heading off towards the sea, but again, providing that evidence that people were here. They were actually at this point at some point in the past, and through the study and the analysis of these remains, that we can add to our understanding of people's lives too. Now, if we look at the research questions that we posed during the 2016 review of the research agenda, we came up with a whole series of different questions that we felt we should be applying. The first of these, colonisation and recolonisation, is important because we want to understand the pattern of the human presence and absences across Wales at specific times in the past. We also want to be targeting the survey of some of the locations to perhaps counterbalance some of that coastal bias, looking perhaps at rivers and lakesides rather than just always looking at the coast. But that having been said, there is a whole wealth of information that remains concealed to us that is around the coastlines, and it's important to take the opportunity to revisit and look at those too. Chronology remains really important. We only have a handful of radiocarbon dates and dating for some of our sites. So to be able to understand the bigger picture of human activity throughout time, it's important to be able to obtain these dates, but also to connect them to that environmental context so we understand the climate and the environment in which people were around too. So looking at some of the animals and the humans as well. Tracking some of the chronology through the changing technologies, and particularly focusing on some of the transitions. We're very clear in archaeology, we tend to compartmentalize things into periods and chunks, but we often forget to look at those boundaries, and those boundaries really are blurred, and that it's really important to get that better understanding of the chronologies that are involved in the dating of sites, especially when we find sites that span some of the time periods, which are rather arbitrary in many respects. Also, to understand the chronological framework for environmental change, this is really important to understand when the sea levels were rising, looking at the vegetation at different times, and looking also at the geomorphology, the shape of the landscape that people would have inhabited. And also to apply science. I think really there are so many new scientific techniques that have come to light over the past 5 years that are now becoming commonplace, and to be able to apply these to our evidence is really important too. The third topic is prospection. Locating undiscovered sediment traps, looking at undertaking field reconnaissance into under-researched areas, and doing this as widely as possible. There's opportunity here through things like predictive modelling, GIS, supplemented with information perhaps from the aerial and satellite dating and remote sensing too. Especially in the offshore zone as much as on the land, to where so many sites will be concealed. So there's a great opportunity here to look for and to identify and to look at predicting where sites might be too. Also under prospection, the continuation of looking for rock art, cave art, and also to understand that the dating of such activity too. Ground truthing would entail the follow-up after this prospection has taken place, undertaking perhaps some more coring, test pitting, and trial pitting to confirm and to characterize understanding of any stratigraphic sequences. I've already talked quite a lot about artifact analysis, but to understand artifacts, we really do need to obtain artifacts from well-stratified and well-dated sites, so all these things interconnect in so many ways, and to look at and resolve some of the questions we have arising about typologies at various stages as well. And the opportunities that I've already highlighted about reevaluating some of the archives that are held in our museum analysis, and also looking at these tools in new ways, perhaps looking at them from the point of view of looking at their functional analysis and applying methods to look at this, and also to carry out some experimental work. Also important here is raw material, and we really don't have a great understanding of where some of the raw materials come from and what indeed some of the materials are that people were selecting to make their artifacts. So that helps us to understand their mobility, their movement, the transportation of materials, both naturally and also humanly, for making tools too. So to understand these and to even take that further, looking at the chemical composition of flint and materials is really important too. We also want to be able to continue to locate the research agenda within its wider British and European context. There are other research agendas developed elsewhere around the country, so to connect those together remains an important aspect, so that we're not just looking at Wales in its isolation, because throughout these periods, Wales was part of this wider British and European network, and people were travelling sometimes great distances too. And also, I think it's also very important for us to continue to promote the need of the importance of the Palaeolithic and Mesolithic resource to us as important in helping us to understand where we are today. So, what would I like you to start to do? Well, there are so many ways or many people can contribute towards the development of the new research framework. A lot has changed over the past 5 years. We're all aware of the changes that have happened so rapidly just in the past 1 year, let alone over this longer 5-year period too. And I believe that there is an important role for everyone to play, both in contributing towards the development of the research questions, but also, I think, in contributing towards how we might be able to take some of the questions that we have and start to find ways to deliver them in ways that include as many people as we possibly can from across all communities and all the people of Wales, and get everybody involved in working in different ways with this. So for now, I'd really welcome your thoughts, and if you have any contributions you would like to offer, please do email me directly or feed through the Facebook group and the other media that will be provided for you to do so. And I'd be really pleased to hear your thoughts on the research agenda and your thoughts on how we might take this forward. Thank you very much.